everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Winter wheat planting is underway across a good portion of Oklahoma. We'll have an update and talk about field conditions coming up. But first, our focus is on fall armyworms. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our extension entomologist, Dr. Tom Royer.
Of course, it's that time of year where the fall armyworms are making their way into Oklahoma. And Tom, are we seeing the fall armyworms like we were thinking we would?
We're actually starting. I'm getting reports of. I have several county educators that are running pheromone traps around the state, and they send in information to me, and they've been seeing an increase in fall armyworm catches in their pheromone traps. And as a matter of fact, we're running a set of traps right here in Perkins, where we're working to test out different pheromone dispensers, and they're specifically for fall armyworms. But the bottom line is we are seeing flights coming in. I'm getting reports, so there's a lot of concern about it right now.
What should producers be doing this time of year for their future crops?
For their future crops, they really need to be watching their crop. Their wheat crops as they're coming up out of the ground for fall armyworms, because we're going to continue to have flights coming in. Just because we're catching moths doesn't mean that a particular field's going to have a lot of egg lay, but it is a early warning sign that should get producers out looking at their fields and checking to make sure if they're seeing evidence of feeding, the early feeding, the window painting that we talk about. That's an early key. And just to scout and count the number of worms, our threshold's somewhere around 2 to 3 per row foot.
And actually, you're doing some really interesting research when it comes to the different strains of fall armyworms.
Right. We were contacted by a graduate student that's doing some genetic work and she wants to get fall armyworms from different parts of the country so that she can do some genetic comparisons. And so part of our work this summer is that we occasionally send her some of the not the caterpillars, but the moths that we're catching, and then she squishes them and does their DNA stuff with them. And we have 2 strains that we know of. One's called the rice strain, one's called the corn strain, and they appear to prefer different crops, food crops, when they're feeding. So we typically, if you're a wheat grower, we typically get the corn strain, but if you're trying to grow Bermuda grass or something, sometimes that one's the rice strain that comes in. And she's just trying to figure out what their distribution is around the country.
And help folks like you in the long term, focus on working with one or another.
Absolutely. It'll help us really determine. There might even be, down the line, there might even be a different pheromone that is attracted to one versus the other. We don't know, but yeah, the more information we can have, it never hurts to have more information.
And until then, the Oklahoma producers need to be out in their fields scouting for fall armyworms.
Yes. Don't want to get caught having a nice crop coming up out of the ground and all of a sudden it disappears because the caterpillars got bigger and hungrier and chewed it all down.
Whenever the weather turns colder, are we still going to see the same insect pressure?
No, they'll slow down. The flights will probably slow down some. And once we hit a killing frost, that's pretty much the end of our fall armyworm season for this year. And then we'll just have to wait again and see what happens next year. But they do not overwinter in Oklahoma, so they won't hang around for next spring or anything. But up until that killing frost, got to be ready for them.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Tom Royer, Extension Entomologist here at Oklahoma State University.
We're joined now by Dr. Amanda Silva, our Extension Small Grain Specialist. Amanda, an exciting time. Fall planting is underway. How are things going?
Yeah, so things are going really well for our dual-purpose producers. As far as the USDA crop progress from last week, we were about 30% of the state with the wheat planted, and I am seeing a lot of drills rolling around the state, so we are seeing good soil moisture and producers are trying to take advantage of that.
I had a chance to go out to northwestern Oklahoma the past few days, and you see a lot of this baby wheat coming up and, like you said, drills rolling. Talk a little bit about the research that you have started here in other parts of the state, what you and the team have going this fall.
Yeah, so here it's what we call our forage trial. So we have different varieties planted, and from this trial we will collect biomass by December. So just to compare and look at differences in varieties in fall forage production. And later on in February of next year, we'll start collecting data for first hollow stem and also comparing those varieties. And throughout the state, we are looking at performance of the varieties in different locations. And one of the locations that we'll have this year in Arnall, we will be comparing grain only and a dual purpose trials in the same farm. So that will be good to see as well in the same environment.
We see the dual purpose wheat getting started. Now as we enter into October, it really will be time for the grain only portion. What kind of guidance do you have for producers so they're successful?
Yeah, so as we enter in October, so the optimal timing for grain only planting, it's usually mid-October or so. We are seeing good soil moisture, and I guess good recommendations is to keep the basics of agronomy, look at the soil fertility, good seeding depth at planting, use good seed quality and things like that. I'm also hearing this year a lot of people are treating their seed due to the issues that we had last year from bunts and smunts, so that's a good idea as well.
And we heard about the fall armyworms. Want to keep an eye out for those as well.
Yeah, so for the wheat that was planted early, that has already emerged, so we are receiving reports of fall armyworms, so it's a good idea to scout your field, for producers to scout their fields every day, as they can do a lot of damage to the wheat and reduce a lot fall forage production. So if you see the window pane in the leaves, so it's good to go ahead and control it.
Okay, Amanda, thanks a lot. We will see you again soon.
Hello, Wes Lee here with your Mesonet weather report. Mostly cooler than normal temperatures, lots of sunshine, and limited amounts of rain in the east and zip in the west. Sounds just like the week before. As you can see from this map from September 29th, it has been about 3 weeks since even 1/10 of an inch of rain has been received in the western half of the state. Unfortunately, this is the time of year that we need to see some moisture in the west to get some wheat planted and to continue its growth. This soil moisture map is the one I used a week ago to show you the drying conditions in the west. Now fast forward to this week and notice how much the red areas have intensified. These maps are percent plant available water in the upper 4 inches of soil. I'm sticking with shallow sensors because that is the area so important to wheat right now. Another way to look at how the soils are drying is this map of the 7-day change in the 10-inch fractional water index. Negative numbers shown in brown indicate drying areas. Green, positive numbers show improvement. This past week, we saw much more brown than green. Outside of a slight chance of rain over the weekend, next week appears to be extremely dry with much lower than normal chances of rain over the southern plains. Now here's Gary with an ever-increasing drought picture.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, it was another month of rainfall in one area and lack of rainfall in the other. This time it was southern Oklahoma that got lucky, and northern Oklahoma was left without. That did have impacts on the drought monitor, so let's take a look. We have a little bit more of that extreme drought in southwestern Oklahoma, surrounded by extreme to moderate drought. We do have another little area in Beaver County of extreme drought, surrounded by that smaller area of extreme to moderate drought. And then, of course, out in the western panhandle, we still have that little bit larger area in Cimarron County of severe drought. Now, we do have a little bit more of that abnormally dry conditions, yellow, up in north central Oklahoma, which is really starting to get dry, and we can look at that on the latest rainfall maps from the Oklahoma Mesonet for the month of September. We see about 1 to 2 inches across much of northern Oklahoma. Now across the southern parts of the state, really south of I-40, we had from 3 to 6 inches of rain. The one difference is out in far southwestern Oklahoma, they generally were just a little bit less than an inch, and that wasn't good for that area. When we look at that rainfall for September compared to normal, we see deficits again across much of northern Oklahoma, north of I-40. Some pretty good surplus amounts south of I-40. The two areas of drought, northeast is building, southwest has been there a while. Now for precipitation, this is a pretty strong signal for below normal precipitation for the month of October. Really, especially across the northwest and the Panhandle, but the entire state sees greatly increased odds of below normal precipitation for the next month. So the lack of rainfall across northern Oklahoma with another dry month will probably mean some drought development in those areas, again, unless they get rainfall. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
We're talking wheat prices right now with our grain marketing specialist, Kim Anderson. And Kim, how does this year's wheat crop compare to last year's?
Well, if you look at the current price, it's around $4.40. You go back to June 1 to current, the price range has been from about $3.80 to $4.65, and the average $4.20. You look back over the last 5 years, that range has been from $2.55 to $5.90 and average $4.12. So our $4.40 price is not too bad right now.
You know, moving on to the world wheat crop, how is harvest progressing along for everybody else in the world?
Well, it's going relatively well. Normally when we get to October 1, we've got about 90% of the world's crop harvested. In other words, the northern hemisphere crop's essentially in the bin. We got a little bit of wheat left in northern the U.S. and Canada and a little bit in Russia, but about 88 to 90% is already harvested. We're projecting a 28.3 billion bushel crop. You can compare that to a 5-year average of 27.6 billion bushels. I think there could be maybe some problems with quality, or just the quality's not as good as it was last year. You look at Russia, some reports out of there, their quality may be a little lower, and of course our protein was relatively low.
So, you know, talking about the northern hemisphere, so how does the southern hemisphere look?
Well, in the southern hemisphere, what we got left is Argentina and Australia for exportable wheat. You look at Australia, it's projected to be about 1 billion bushels, a little bit over than that. 5-year average is 792 billion. Argentina projected 716 million bushels. 5-year average 643 million. So above average crop coming on the southern hemisphere, and that means that our harvest may only be 88% complete, but it's pretty well done.
Yep, so we're in October now. Producers are going to be planning for grain only. So what are market analysts looking at right now?
Well, right now I think they're watching exports. Russia's projected to have record exports coming out in September. Our hard red winter wheat exports are about 5% above last year. All wheat exports about 6% above last year. So the exports are looking relatively good. They're also looking at dry conditions. You go up to the hard red winter wheat area, about the last quarter of Oklahoma, all the way up to Canada, down into Texas is drought to the west of that. Russia's got some large area of port and wheat production area that's dry, and so the market's concerned about that.
So what's the price outlook for wheat?
Well, right now you can forward contract wheat for about $4.60, $4.70 for next harvest. I think that's pretty close to where we'll be. We may be $4.75, $4.80, depending on the size of the crop. If you're looking out over the next 90 days, if the dry conditions persist, I think we could have slightly higher prices. Or if export demand goes down, then I think our prices could decline a little bit.
All righty, Kim. Dr. Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Today I thought I'd share a little bit of info about the creation of ranch dressing. Sometimes it can be difficult, if not impossible, to know where a particular food comes from. However, in the case of ranch dressing, we do. Steve Henson began working on his recipe for ranch dressing while employed as a full-time construction worker and part-time cook in Anchorage, Alaska during the early 1950s. In 1954, Henson and his wife Gail would relocate to Santa Barbara, California, where they would open a dude ranch called Hidden Valley. Later, the ranch would also become a steakhouse. where the dressing Henson had created would be served. Soon, the ranch dressing became so popular that the couple began selling jars of the finished product for local customers to take home. Demand for the dressing would reach the point where Henson and his wife would eventually need to open a factory to manufacture the product. The dressing was first sold to grocery stores in the Southwest before becoming nationally available. The national obsession with ranch dressing would kick into high gear when it was first used as an ingredient for snack foods in 1987, when it was added to Cool Ranch Doritos, and the rest, as they say, is history. Ranch dressing is now the most popular salad dressing in the United States. However, it's not only used as a salad topping. Consumers also use it as a dip for wings, pizza, and French fries. So whether you enjoy it with pizza or a salad, just remember Steve Henson. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or visit fapc.biz.
Last week we really focused on dual purpose wheat, and Brian, there's a difference whenever it comes to applications of soil fertility on the grain only applications.
Yeah, traditionally we would go with similar. We would make sure there's some up front and then apply in the season. But we're really trying to move away from that. We've got a lot of new research that supports what we've been talking about for many years now. With grain only wheat, we do not need a lot up front. We put it up front for dual purpose so we get that biomass, that forage, but that forage in the fall and early spring isn't that beneficial for the grain crop. And so recent research, we brought in a lot of the work over the last 5 or 6 years to compile about 34 research studies. And of those 34 research studies that have points where we compare all nitrogen pre-plant versus all nitrogen in season, the numbers are really shocking. So out of those 34 experiments, of about 5% of the time that the pre-plant outperforms in season. And typically that's because the in season one is an application made when it should have been made. There's about 1/3 of the time of those sites that we get better yield when we wait to an in season application. And the rest of the time, so about 60% of the time, it's a wash on yield whether you apply pre-plant or in season. But the big win is that 85% of the time that in-season application gave you better protein for when you hauled it off. So that means your yield is going to be the same with the 33% chance you make more, but you have almost guaranteed probability that your protein is going to be better if you wait to in-season.
So if I'm understanding you right, you're saying hold off on nitrogen applications, you know, at planting, but really put all the chips in season.
Yeah, I am really saying that. That's what we're moving to. I still want a little starter down, some 1846-0, 1152-0, something going down in furrow, providing some phosphorus, a little bit of nitrogen starter. But on my research, we're going with very, very low residual nitrate levels, and most farmer fields have quite a bit more than I'm working on research. And what happens is that reduced nitrate and nitrogen levels early is keeping us a little bit more smaller, more compact plant. There's research that shows it actually might make the plant explore the soil more to find more nitrogen. We're doing more work on that. But once it gets into spring green up, that's when we load it up, because that's really when the plant needs it. And applying it in the spring green up February through March is really getting us it when the plant needs it. We can take stock in. If the stand is miserable and we don't have much to work in, we don't have to put anything on. But if we're going into the spring, everything looks good, we have good soil moisture, that's when we really apply the nitrogen to it. That's when the crop needs it, and it makes sure the nitrogen is still there when it comes time to building the grain, which means that's when we get the protein.
So with that, when would be a good time to say put out an enriched strip for a monitoring process?
So the enriched strip timing is the same as always been. It can be as early as now, pre-plant, all the way through November, early December. So basically, focus on getting your wheat in the ground, get in a good stand, slow down, make sure you have good seed soil contact, you're setting those drills properly, you get the right starter in, and then you can go out and put out the enriched strips. If you're putting it out and it's dry, I would recommend using liquid so you get that in the system. It helps better with the liquid. But the whole dry thing and waiting it's not really about the crop for me right now, waiting for the crop. It's about waiting for the right time to apply and not getting in a rush and applying when the weather's just not optimum. And so this big window lets us get our strips down whenever. We could use liquid, we could use urea, maybe safe in the urea, but it can wait. You gotta remember too, I like to remind people, if it's too dry to apply fertilizer, the crop's usually not using a lot of nitrogen because it's just dry. And so we don't need to rush it on then.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Brian Arnall, Soil Nutrition Precision Nutrient Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
In early April, the USDA alerted everyone that there had been a case of high-path avian influenza that was found in South Carolina. It was in a turkey flock. A little over 1,500 turkeys died, and an additional 32,000 plus were depopulated. This is the first case of avian influenza that we've had in the United States since 2017. I think most people can remember that in 2014 and 15 we had a major outbreak of avian influenza. It was one of the most costly animal diseases ever in the United States. We lost about 50 million turkeys and chickens in that outbreak. If you are a commercial or a backyard poultry producer, I think this is important for us to remember that biosecurity is key to preventing this disease. If you don't have a plan, you need to develop one. If you've got a protocol for biosecurity, please review it. Biosecurity can be basically broken down to 4 things. That's traffic, isolation, sanitation, and animal husbandry. When we think about traffic, you need to control what people are allowed on your property. When you think about isolation, we need to be sure and isolate any new purchased birds, or if we have any sick birds, they need to be gotten out of the flock and put in an isolation pan. Then you have sanitation. Make sure we're being clean. Make sure we're cleaning all the feed troughs, water bowls, anything like that. We want to keep things clean. We also want to make sure that we pick up any dead animals quickly and dispose of them properly. We need to practice good animal husbandry. That means we recognize when an animal is sick and we get them out of the flock and isolate it. I think it's important for us all to remember, whether we are commercial poultry producers or maybe we just have 1 or 2 chickens in our backyard, it's our responsibility to protect the poultry industry. It is vital to our country and it is important that we protect that industry. If you would like some more information about avian influenza or biosecurity in birds, please go to sunup.okstate.edu.
October is a traditional time when we'll bring the cattle in, perhaps for preg checking, certainly to wean the calves, and it's a time that we can do some evaluation of cattle as to which ones we're going to cull and which heifer calves we might want to keep back as replacements. So this is a good time to consider one of the traits that I think is really not given the due that it deserves in terms of its importance financially to the beef cattle industry, and that's temperament. We know from research that's been done for years that the excitability of the cattle is actually fairly high. Estimates are that 35 to 45% of the differences we see in cattle's temperament is actually due to genetics. That means to me that we can make some real progress in our herds by culling out those wild cows and not selecting their daughters or sons as replacements to go back into as seed stock into our herds. Also, there's research now that has come from Mississippi State University, and in fact about 14 years ago they published a study looking at 210 calves that they had in their farm to feed out program. They looked at the personality of these calves as they went on to a working chute, as they exited the working chute, and how they acted when a person would walk into a pen with those calves. They evaluated each one of those situations on a 1 through 5 scale, with 1 being very docile, calm cattle, and 5 being the most aggressive, excitable calves in the group. They then followed those calves through the feedlot phase and looked at the profitability of those calves based on the temperament score that they got when they first were weaned and went into the feedlot. The calves that were in the lowest excitability score, those that were the calmest, they averaged about a $42 advantage over the calves that were in that most excitable, the score number 5, in terms of that personality score. And one of the key elements that enters into that was the health cost. Those calves that were most excitable, they were the ones that had the most health issues, had the most treatment costs, and therefore probably had an impact also on their ability to gain and to gain efficiently. So that gives us another good excuse why, when we're working cattle this fall, that we have that crazy cow that comes through the chute, the one that gives us all the trouble, that we might as well go ahead and cull her and not save her heifer calf back as a replacement. In the long term, then, I think we'll improve the temperament of our entire beef herd and actually help the profitability, not only on our ranch, but for those buyers of our calves in the future. Hey, we hope that you'll tune in again next week and watch us on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Thanks so much for joining us for SUNUP. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.